Greater Israel Project. Context. History. We've got the main man himself, Jeffery Sachs, who, unironically, is Jewish, but you hear it getting bandied about quite a bit by certain influencers or media personalities. Greater Israel. Sometimes you think, well, what is that? This is the perfect breakdown. He's very, very well respected. We'll get into it.
Welcome back. We are joined today by Professor Jeffery Sachs to discuss the Greater Israel Project. So thank you for coming back on.
Well, great to be with you, Glenn, always.
Well, you recently published an article about the future of the Greater Israel Project. And I thought a good place to start is perhaps how this concept is defined and also how it has shaped the wider region.
Absolutely. Israel is a state. It was established with certain borders in 1948 when Israel declared independence, following a partition plan that had been voted by the UN in its early days in 1947. Israel's declaration of independence generated a war because the Arab states rejected the partition plan, which was non-binding. It was an advisory plan. Israel used that as the basis for a unilateral declaration of independence in 1948. Israel won the war, took more territory, and then in 1967, the so-called Six-Day War occurred, again, with some debates about how and who provoked it. But the fact is that Israel captured in that war the rest of what had been British mandatory Palestine. In other words, Israel now had 100% of the territory under control after the 1967 war. Then, after Israel and Egypt reached an agreement, what had been the Sinai Peninsula, also taken in 1967, was returned to Egypt in a peace agreement. But Israel, in effect, kept control over three main places with large Palestinian Arab populations: Gaza, the West Bank, meaning the Palestinian territory west of the Jordan River, and East Jerusalem, which is a concentrated Palestinian Arab population. The Greater Israel Project is a term that's used to signify the desire to keep all of that territory that was captured in the Six-Day War and to resist any kind of Palestinian state. And this is a project under various names that goes back to the beginning of even the first Jewish homeland, to call it that, under the Balfour Declaration, when this area was under the British mandate. And it has been an ideology, though not by any means the only ideology, of the Zionist cause, which means the political ideology of a Jewish state in this area. It's been an ideology all along since 1917, since the Balfour Declaration opened up a Jewish homeland in what had been Ottoman Palestine, but now was British Mandatory Palestine, until Britain gave up its claim in the interest of finding some post-British solution in some kind of partition. So the Greater Israel Project says this is ours and it's going to stay ours. The problem with the Greater Israel ideology in a practical and a legal and a moral sense is that there are 8 million Palestinian Arabs and there are approximately 8 million Israeli Jews in this place, which was British Palestine. And it's the 8 million Israeli Jews, according to the ideology of Greater Israel, that will rule over the 8 million Palestinian Arabs, or expel them, or ethnically cleanse the region, or kill them, which is also happening in shocking numbers in Israel's war in Gaza. So the current government, led by Benjamin Netanyahu, is the most radical extremist government that Israel has ever had. But and it is ardently a Greater Israel project. I can add that in the more expansive versions of Greater Israel, the ambition goes beyond even the borders of the British Mandate because of two reasons. One, that it is held by advocates of Greater Israel that it's necessary for Israel to control territory in Syria, such as the Golan Heights, or territory in Lebanon, for example, south of the Litani River, in order for Israel to be secure. So there's a security argument that says Greater Israel extends beyond Israel's border. There's also a theological argument.
Just 1 second before we get into the theological. That's the whole promised 2,000 years ago. But the thing is, with Lebanon and the Golan Heights, Syria, Israel talk about buffer zones. Oh, well, we need a buffer zone. So if we can just bulldoze X amount of miles into their territory and put a wall up, have that as a buffer zone, so we can't be attacked by terrorists. But then in the blink of an eye, they're building and they're settling. They're sending settlers from Europe to live on the land, which is meant to be the buffer zone. It's all nonsense.
The religious holders of this ideology, which say that according to the Jewish Bible, the Old Testament for Christians, and the Jewish Torah for Jews, that God promised land beyond what was the British Mandate from the great river in Egypt, which in the biblical text is not the Nile necessarily, but sometimes is interpreted as the Nile, to the great river of Mesopotamia, which is the Euphrates River. And so some religious ideologues believe that it's God's promise to the Jewish people, a land that goes well beyond the British Mandate. And the U.S. ambassador to Israel today, Mike Huckabee, who is an evangelical Christian fundamentalist, espouses the idea that Israel can take land from Egypt to the Euphrates because that's God's promise. And in a notorious interview with Tucker Carlson a few months ago, Huckabee unabashedly said, yes, what Israel can take, it's Israel's, because that's God's promise in the book of Genesis.
And this is the thing as well that people need to understand. A lot of the evangelical Christians, especially in America, the Bible that they preach from, the Bible they go off, is the Schofield Bible. If you just Google that, the Schofield Bible, as in, Nancy Schofield from the BBC. But yeah, that was updated. That's why they all preach that the Jews are the chosen ones. They are truly Abraham's children, even though in the original Bible we are all children of Abraham. But, that's what a lot of these evangelical preachers in America, that's why they all pledge allegiance to Israel and ask their congregation to do the same.
It's rather shocking for 100 reasons, by the way: practical, legal, moral, ethical, and theological, I'll add, because other theologians or theologians, let me say, not other theologians, but theologians were completely scandalized by what Huckabee said, both Jewish and non-Jewish theologians. But in
Sorry for the interrupt again, but when Tucker said to him, so what, so they could take it all? And Huckabee was like, yeah, I wouldn't have a problem with that. That's what he said.
any event, it is to say that for some, Greater Israel is impunity within the broader region. Now, all of this matters because Israel has been pursuing this doctrine under Netanyahu for 30 years. Netanyahu became prime minister in 1996. He's been prime minister off and on for much of the period of the last 30 years. He comes from a political movement, Likud, still the party that he leads, which holds this Greater Israel view ostensibly on security grounds. So Netanyahu was never religious, never arguing from biblical texts until fairly recently. And the Likud, in its founding charter in 1977, said that all of the territory from the Jordan River to the Mediterranean Sea would be Israeli sovereignty. So this goes back 50 years, basically.
In the Likud party, which is the likes of Smotrich, Ben Gvir, and I think it's Naftali Bennett, very, very right wing. They view the Palestinians and the Arabs as Amalek. We've spoke about that, what that means in the context of the Bible. The original quote, Netanyahu mentioned it after October 7th. It goes somewhere along the line of kill all of them, all the men, all the women, all the infants, all the babies, the cattle, oxes, sheep, spare none of them. They are Amalek. That's the Likud party.
And in the mind and ideology, even before the founding charter of the Likud. So it's been Netanyahu's mission to keep Israeli sovereignty over all of mandatory Palestine. But in the current coalition, and this is a trajectory that Israel has been on since that 1977 founding charter of Likud, the religious impulse has become also more and more important. These are religious zealots or extremists. They espouse a truly, it's ugly to say, but they espouse a Jewish supremacy that as an American Jew I find completely repulsive, disgusting, and contrary to 2,000 years of Jewish teachings under rabbinic Judaism. These are not people that reflect the history of Judaism. And as a Jew, I can say that the views of people like Smotrich and Ben Gvir are fascistic, disgusting, and completely extremist in my view. They have nothing to do with rabbinic Judaism, which taught something completely different. But they are a supremacist idea and based in some sense on this interpretation that God promised this to his chosen people.
And this is the thing, I've admitted, and I'll say it again, in my 20s and 30s, especially in my 20s, I was in the BNP. I was all about white pride, white nationalist. But when your brain grows a bit and you do the tiniest bit of research, you realise ethno-states they're not really good, like. I'm embarrassed to say, but there is only one ethno-state in the world. One. Israel. It is what it is, like, because if you live there and you're not Jewish, you're a second-class citizen. It's an apartheid state. They're annexing land left, right and centre. And like you say, the Greater Israel Project, Netanyahu's held the map up. He wants it all. From the Nile to the Euphrates, he wants it all, like. And they won't stop till they get it all, because if they did manage to defeat Iran, which I pray they can't, and at the minute it looks like they can't. Turkey's next. They've said it. Their politicians, the Likud members, the Likud party, they have said Turkey is next. They're the next threat. But when Israel says you're a threat, that means they want to attack you.
And therefore, it is their right to conquer this land, killing as many people as would be necessary to do so. And it's also an extremely, what should I say, extremely tribal view that the lives that matter are Jewish lives and that non-Jewish lives don't matter. Smotrich and Ben-Gvir sometimes put it quite literally that for every one Jewish life that is taken in this conflict, 100 or 1,000 Arab lives should be taken. It's a vulgarity.
And this is the thing, while he's speaking about Lebanon, we've just released some statistics, and I don't know how accurate they are, but they talk about since the war between Israel, America, and Iran, the death tolls, Iran, America, Israel, the highest out of them, I think it was 4,000, mainly civilians in Iran, have died since this conflict started. The number of civilians killed in Lebanon is 5,000, is higher. More people have been killed in Lebanon since the 28th of Feb, since this war started, than in Iran. So Israel pulled in America, fight our war for us, while America are using all their weaponry, all their money. Israel have been bombing. They've displaced 1.2 million people in Lebanon. 1.2. And at the start of the conflict, they told one city to all evacuate to the beach. So they all built tents on the beach. And that night, the IDF bombed that beach, where it was mainly women and children. This is what we're dealing with.
But, and here's my point, it is the prevailing doctrine of the current government of Israel. So this is not some fringe ideology. This is the doctrine of the government of Israel. Now, just to conclude on what is Greater Israel, Netanyahu has espoused this for 30 years. As I say, there are two strands. One, a kind of security argument that Israel can only be safe as Greater Israel. And the second, a religious argument that this is God's purpose. And this is therefore redeeming God's purpose by the Jewish people. And both of these now sit together in Israeli politics. I should quickly add that the religious view rose after 1967, in particular, with hundreds of thousands of illegal settlers from Israel into the Palestinian occupied lands. Illegal settlements because you're not allowed to settle occupied territory that needs to be returned to the rightful political entity, not Israel, but to a Palestinian entity. And yet hundreds of thousands of settlers came in, some because they wanted swimming pools and more land, but many others for religious purposes that form this Jewish supremacist idea now that is in government. So this has developed over decades. Final point, sorry to go on, but the final point is that when Netanyahu came in, he had strong American backing and strong American advisors. And the idea was the following. Greater Israel would lead to militant resistance. After all, it's a denial of the political right of self-determination of the Palestinian Arab people. And the UN General Assembly has said that not only does do the Palestinians have the right of self-determination, but they have the right of armed struggle for self-determination. That idea is not outside of international law. The right of armed struggle for self-determination has been recognized repeatedly by the UN General Assembly, in fact. So Netanyahu and his American advisors said, well, we are going to stand for Greater Israel. We know this will be trouble. There will be resistance, what they call terrorism, what others call the struggle for self-determination. You know, it's all in the rhetoric and the eye of the beholder. But what Netanyahu said was very pertinent, and he was backed by the U.S. Neoconservatives. He said that you don't root out what they call the terrorism, and others would call those for armed struggle for self-determination. You don't root them out by fighting those militants. You root them out by overturning the governments of those who support the militants. So you don't defeat Hamas per se or Hezbollah per se. You have to fight the governments that support those militant groups. That's their ideology. Again, I find it repulsive because the way to fight an armed insurgency is to sit down and negotiate a political solution in which there is the rights of political self-determination of the Palestinian people. And that's what ideas like the two-state solution have proposed since 1997.
And that's why these liberation fronts, Hamas, Hezbollah, that's why they get prescribed as terrorism groups. Because then international law doesn't matter. Because all the terrorists, we can preemptively attack them if we think they might be scheming or plotting against us. It's all, and you just look at what countries have prescribed them. I'm sure you can find that online. The majority of countries that have Hamas and Hezbollah prescribed have politicians and their democracies bought and paid for by the lobby.
Actually back to 1947. But for Netanyahu, this is armed struggle, and armed struggle that has to be crushed. And the way to crush what he calls the terrorism is to overturn other governments. Now, he captured American politics. It's true. Israel, under Netanyahu, successfully mobilized American politics for the cause of Greater Israel. This is rather shocking. It's also a very complicated story of American politics, and it's not a simple story. Of course, there were American Jews that were part of that lobby. There was the direct engagement of Israel in American politics relentlessly, but there's also another complicated piece of Americana, which is the Christian evangelicals like Huckabee, who constitute tens of millions of voters, heavily concentrated in the Republican Party and in Trump's voter base. So they also, by biblical terms, say, well, that's Israel's. By the way, they don't say it because they love the Jews or they love Israel. They say it because they read the Bible that the condition for the second coming of Jesus Christ is Israel's control over this land. So they read it as prophecy, not as somehow a gift to the Jewish people. In fact, they think in their biblical interpretation coming from the book of Revelation, the Jews are going to die in the final struggle, or they're going to be converted, or they're going to be condemned in the final judgment. It's all very, very weird. But from 1996 onward, the American government has basically backed the Greater Israel Project. And it has gone to war constantly to fight Israel's claim to overturn governments that were supporting Palestinian rights. And Iraq is a classic case. The 2003 U.S. war on Saddam Hussein to overthrow the Iraqi government was completely pretextual. It was based on absolutely deliberate propaganda. that the U.S. had to invade Iraq after 9/11 to prevent Iraq from getting, or to dismantle its weapons of mass destruction, which then were shown not to exist at all. And they said, oh, so sorry, we thought they existed. No, they knew they didn't exist. This was a Netanyahu neoconservative plan to overthrow a government that was supporting the Palestinian cause on a pretext, on a lie, a war on utter lies. And this has gone on now for 30 years. And just about all the wars in the region, in one way or another, include the CIA and Mossad and Greater Israel as a motivation. So overthrowing Bashar al-Assad in Syria, which was a CIA operation called Operation Timber Sycamore, signed by Obama in 2012, 2013, tasking the CIA to overthrow Bashar al-Assad, was also at the behest of Greater Israel. Why? Because Assad had links with Iran, and Iran was seen as the supporter of Hamas and Hezbollah, and hence this axis of resistance, so-called, needed to be defeated by overthrowing Bashar al-Assad.
And exactly the same with Gaddafi in Libya, because he was sympathetic to the Palestinian cause, and this is why they went after Iran. Or Iran fund their terrorist proxies. No. Do the 5 minutes research into Shia Muslims. One of their main things is the ethics, standing up for the oppressed. Even though some of the Hamas fighters and Hezbollah fighters are Sunnis, they're still Muslim brothers, one ummah. They're standing up for the oppressed. That's all they're doing. They're not the state sponsor of terrorism. The CIA and Mossad, they are the state sponsors of terrorism.
That turned out to be a 15-year bloody war caused by the United States, prolonged by the United States, denied by the United States because they called it the Syrian civil war. There was nothing civil about it. This was a war by the CIA and Mossad to create a government that would not back the Palestinian people. Well, the long and the short of it is that since 1996, Iran has been the prime target for Greater Israel proponents. And when the war, this current war, started on February 28th, 2026, when Israel and the United States attacked Iran in a completely unprovoked war of aggression, completely illegal, completely fatuous, and a failure. When they did that, Netanyahu tweeted, "This is my dream of 40 years." And I read that and I was taken aback, because I had always said it was his dream of 30 years, because I didn't know what his dream was for the 10 years before he became prime minister. But this is his dream of 40 years. Well, my point has been, Netanyahu, go home, take your own dream away from the United States. And to the United States, Greater Israel is not an American project. It's not in America's interest. It's not according to morality. It is not according to theology. It is not according to international law. It's disgusting. It's perpetual war. And why the United States backs this is a disgrace. It's because of lobbying and people who are not thinking straight, and big money in campaigns, and tens of millions of Protestant evangelical voters looking for the end of times, and many odd things. I live in a kind of crazy country that is able to do this. But this has been a 30-year perpetual war for something that has no justification whatsoever. So that.
And it doesn't have no justification at all. And if you just look back, there was a reel going around in Netanyahu, even in the 90s, holding up his little placard with a picture of a bomb on, like nearly full to the top, Iran are weeks away from nuclear weapons. Iran are weeks away from nuclear weapons. Saying it every few years, wherever he could, in America, at the UN. And then Trump last year saying, oh yeah, we've obliterated, were his words. We have obliterated Iran's nuclear program. They only wanted nuclear energy. There was a fatwa. They did not want nuclear weapons. They said they were un-Islamic. Go back to the war between Iraq and Iran. Saddam Hussein used chemical weapons on Iranians that he was given by Germany and the United States. Iran decided not to have similar weapons and retaliate with them because they said it was un-Islamic, unethical. They've never wanted a nuke. They've never wanted to blow up the West. Yes, I will agree. They'll chant death to America, but it's death to American politicians. Look at anyone. Look at that guy, O'Keefe, is his surname, who's currently in Iran now. They'll not let you buy anything, man. Generous, welcoming, like when I go to the mosque. The most welcoming people you'll meet. This is all upside down. It's all deflection. What the Israel lobby say about Iran is what they do themselves, 100%. But that was just some important context on the topic. There we go.